Welcome back to Tanya in 5. The last few days we have been studying chapter 4 of book 2 in Tanya. In chapter 3 we concluded with a question. If, as we understood it from the previous chapters, the divine energy is currently invested in us to keep us going, and thus we are really within our source, all of creation is within its source, the divine energy that creates it, then why is it that all of creation, ourselves included, feel a sense of independence? Why don't we sense the truth that God is the only reality here and that we are only subsumed and surrendered within the divine energy? Here the Alter Rebbe answers this question, and essentially it comes down to this. God has the capacity to create. He also has the capacity to conceal his creative power. His capacity to create is expressed in the tetragrammaton, the four-lettered name of Hashem, Yud, He, Vav, and then a He, referred to in Chassidus as Havaya. And the capacity that God has to conceal his creative force is expressed in the name of God, Elohim. Let's go a little deeper. The capacity to create is something that is completely out of the realm of human comprehension, or comprehension of any type other than God alone. You see, we don't even know what nothing is. Matter can never emerge from nothing, and matter can never be returned to nothing. All we do is, and all we experience in our reality is, one thing evolving into another thing, and decomposing into another thing. But we do not really have the notion of absolute nothingness, never mind creating something out of nothing. So the notion of creation, something from nothing, is completely beyond the realm of our comprehension or imagination. Deeper still, the reason why we don't understand what nothing is and we don't understand what something from nothing means is because this creative force is one with God himself. God himself is beyond comprehension. Obviously, he created comprehension, so he's certainly beyond comprehension. And just as he is beyond comprehension, so is his creative force incomprehensible, or beyond comprehension. Now, in the same way, God himself is incomprehensible, and therefore his divine creative force is incomprehensible, the same thing is true of his capacity to conceal himself. Notwithstanding the fact that he invests energy within us to create us, we still don't see it. And that capacity for God to conceal his very creative force from the created being themselves, that too is beyond comprehension. For it too is a divine capacity. And divine capacities are inherently beyond any form of comprehension, considering that they are one with him. More on the oneness between God and his capacities in later chapters. Now let's take this a step further. The creative force and the capacity God has to hide this creative force should not be seen as two competing energies, one to create and one to conceal, and they find some balance in the middle. But rather, they actually work in tandem. A way of thinking about this is the way in which an idea or a feeling is expressed in words. An idea or the feeling is singular entity, a singular concept that is transcendent of any words. In fact, I could express the same idea in many different words. Each person has a different way of saying it, and the same idea can be expressed in multiple languages, because the idea or the feeling is singular, one, and transcendent of a bunch of different words and sentences. But in order for me to deliver the idea to you, I must conceal the idea in words, break it down into a bunch of sentences, words and letters, so that I can convey it to you, and then you can decode it. So you see here, the words play two roles. On the one hand, it conceals the idea, or the idea invests itself within those words. On the other hand, and precisely because it conceals itself, it can then reveal the idea to you. So the words both conceal my idea and also reveal the idea to you. So it's like this medium to transport the idea from me to you. In the language of Kabbalah, this is light and vessel. The light is the singular, pure, divine energy to create. But in order for that energy to be transmitted within the various different types of creation, it must be invested in vessels or words that deliver this energy into each creation in its particular form and manner so that it can live in its particular form and manner. These vessels, these words, are the words of creation described in chapter 1, coming from the Torah in Genesis, which describes creation. The takeaway from all of this is, you see, the Alter Rebbe just told us that we cannot understand God's creative force, we cannot understand God's capacity to hide his creative force. Now, if we can't understand anything, then what was the point of the last 4 chapters? We're left with not understanding. You see, the truth is, to say, look, I don't understand anything, is very cheap. What's much more precious is to think about, why don't I understand? What is it that I don't understand? And that is something I can say as a result of the last 4 chapters. I can say, I know there's a creative force, and I understand why it is that I can't understand the creative force. I can say that God conceals his creative force, and I understand why it is that I cannot comprehend his concealment. And this too is a connection with God. I'm not just saying God is great, and God is beyond anything I can understand. I actually get into the details of why it is that I fail to understand God. And even this knowledge of what it is that I don't understand, this too is a connection to God. Looking forward to seeing you when we conclude chapter 5.